Hello, everybody. Welcome to CalRecycle's rulemaking workshop to talk about beverage container labeling. I'm Adam Tauber. I'm the Assistant Director for Recycling, and welcoming you all here today. So just to set the stage for this, we did receive a request to change the regulations as they pertain to how, in particular, aluminum beverage containers are labeled. And so we've worked up kind of a draft proposal for what we think will work. And we're here to take some comments and have a discussion with anyone who's interested. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Manuel, and he can take it away.
All right, thanks, Adam.
Thanks all for coming.
Hi, thank you all for coming. Adam's already gotten the introductions out of the way. Just a few housekeeping items for our attendees. In the event of an emergency, our evacuation location is Cesar Chavez Park, so please make your way calmly out of the building, head across the street to Cesar Chavez Park. If you need to use the restrooms or the drinking fountain, go out the doors and go ahead and take a left. So the agenda is up on the screen right now. We're just going to go ahead and talk about the purpose of the workshop, why we're gathered here today. We're going to go over the current CRV labeling regulations for cans, and then go into CalRecycle's 2 proposals before opening it up for questions, comments, and inputs. This is a short presentation. It's available already online. We are going to ask that you hold your questions until the end. So the purpose of the workshop and the reason that we're gathered here today was indicated in the notice, and it's up on the screen right now, and it is to consult with the public can manufacturers regulated community and other interested persons on the desirability and appropriateness of developing regulatory amendments to allow the CRV message to appear in locations other than or in addition to the top of metal beverage containers. In a moment, we're going to talk about the current regulations for CRV labeling to set the stage, but the reason that we're holding this workshop is in regards to in response to concerns regarding the production of thinner and lighter cans, resulting in CRV message and sizing that is less visible, and more states requiring similar labeling on can tops, resulting in less available space for labeling. Broadly speaking, there are 4 main considerations for labeling, which are cited in the regulations. These are visibility, method, location, and minimum height. The first 2 of these considerations, visibility and method, come from CCR 2200B, which states that beverage containers shall be clearly, prominently, and indelibly marked by painting, printing, scratch embossing, raised letter embossing, or permanent ink jetting in the specific manner indicated in paragraphs 1, 2, 3, or 4. The visibility portion indicates that beverage containers have to be clearly, prominently, and indelibly marked, and the method is one of those 5 methods: painting, printing, scratch embossing, permanent ink jetting, raised letter embossing. For this workshop, subparagraph 1, which is highlighted in red, is the only subparagraph we're going to be talking about. We're actually going to be covering it in the next slide, but it relates to aluminum and bimetal cans. The other subparagraphs 2, 3, and 4, in case you were curious, have to do with aluminum and bimetal bottles, glass and plastic containers, and plastic portion-controlled cups, which we will not be discussing at this workshop today. So 2 of the considerations that we looked at in the previous slide, the other 2 considerations are location and minimum height, and they are outlined in section 2200B1 for cans. And this reads that metal containers excluding metal bottles shall be marked on the top end of the container in a minimum lettering size of at least 3/16 of an inch in height. Metal containers excluding metal bottles with a top lid of 2 inches or less in diameter shall have a minimum lettering size of at least 1/8 of an inch in height. And if you're using scratched embossed lettering, it has to be a minimum width of 0.004 inches of disturbed surface metal. A couple of things that I wanted to highlight on this slide is that the 0.004 inch of disturbed surface metal is a measure of width, not depth. When these regulations were created, this width established a standard for visibility that was adequately visible and legible. The other thing that I would like to highlight is that the 0.004 width only applies if you're using scratch embossing. Even though it's not mentioned on this slide, you can still affix the message using any method mentioned in the previous slide, and that includes painting, printing, inkjetting, or raised lettering. This leads us into our first proposal. While the regulations already allow cans to have any of the 5 methods indicated, we're proposing updating the language in the regulations to make it clearer that these options apply to cans. In the top corner of this slide, you can see an example of a can top with the CRV message inkjetted. This is already allowed. This is already acceptable. CalRecycle's first proposal will just clarify the language to highlight this. For our second proposal, I'd like to jump back to CCR 2200B1. Recall that this subparagraph focuses on 2 areas, height and location, highlighted in red. We've already mentioned that currently the CRV message for cans has to be on the top of the container. Our second proposal has to do with allowing the message to appear in other locations. Our second proposal provides a second option for can labeling. Under this proposal, the CRV message could be on the top of the container, as it is presently, or a second acceptable option would be for the beverages to be labeled on both the side and the bottom. We believe that this would provide more flexibility. Our last slide provides a draft of how the language could look. This slide shows all 4 labeling considerations: visibility, method, location, and minimum height from the sections we've looked at during this presentation. Note the additions to the existing regulations text in purple. While these are the proposals that we are suggesting to address the purpose of the workshop, we're open to comments, questions, and inputs, and we'll go ahead and open it up to our attendees. If you're watching via webcast, we will regularly be checking the DOR workshop's email on the screen, and we encourage you to write to us. Before I open it up to our attendees to ask for any comments, questions, or inputs, we have one written submission who wished for their comments to be read at the workshop. These comments were submitted by Derek and Danielle Carrington and read as follows. No to the changes allowing the CRV message to appear in other locations. Inspections are difficult in volume, and this only increases the inspection process of time for the consumer, the recycling center, and the processor. There is no benefit to the consumer. They will be unable to recycle unless it is a whole container, so densification of their crushing cans to reduce trips to recycle and also for home storage will be greatly affected. Those were comments submitted by Derek and Danielle Carrington. And with that being said, I would like to go ahead and open it up to our in-house attendees for any comments, questions, or inputs. We will regularly be checking with the webcast to see if there are any comments that are submitted in writing. Thank you.
Hi, Mark Murray with the environmental group Californians Against Waste. I'd like to start with maybe a couple questions. At this stage, what is your objective in terms, or what's the division's objective in terms of having the labeling on both the side and the bottom? What are you trying to achieve in that?
We're looking for options that don't sacrifice the clarity and visibility and still conform to those 4 labeling considerations for the CRV message.
When? When is it that you care about that visibility? At the point of sale for the consumer purchasing, knowing whether or not the container is recycled, or at the recycling center?
It's at all stages. The definition, and I can pull that definition for you, of clear and prominently, to paraphrase, indicates that the message has to be visible by the consumer from the point of purchase all the way to the point of redemption. That's the definition of clear and prominently in the California Code of Regulations.
Yeah. So I guess so maybe my comment would be that I think that the current having the label on the top and if it was on the bottom, embossed, scratched, whatever it is that you call that, I can barely see that. I think that's not a very effective way of communicating the redemption opportunity to the consumer. So the idea of having it on the side, as it already is for glass containers and plastic containers, in my view, in our view, would be more beneficial in terms of communicating that there's a redemption value on this container. I know that initially our program thinking was that having the CRV on the container was going to be helpful and important in terms of an enforcement standpoint, in terms of fraud. And I just don't think that's meaningful anymore, because every aluminum can, every glass container, every plastic container that's sold anywhere in the United States, Mexico, that I'm aware of, I don't travel much beyond that, but all have CRV on it. So you have to work really hard to find containers that don't have CRV on it that are sold outside of California. So I just don't think that having this focus on the CRV on the container as a fraud prevention measure has the same effectiveness that it once did. Those are my comments.
Thank you for your comments.
Greg Herner on behalf of the Can Manufacturers Institute. Robert Budway, the president of the Can Manufacturers Institute, submitted a letter, and I won't recite everything that's in the letter, but the can manufacturer has been working really hard over the last 25 years and have reduced the amount of material in a can by about 30%. Because of what's required on the lid, that's prohibiting them from doing any additional reductions in the amount of material that's being used. We also agree with Mark Murray that, you know, what as a fraud prevention technique, because we have 50 state lids, they're all every state that has a deposit program is on that lid. We have a 50 state lid. That's pretty much what everybody uses for every CRV container that's out there. I have a container here that I brought that it was the closest one to the register at the 7-Eleven on the way over. It has 11 different states at the top. It would have 12 if it was above 3.2% alcohol in Oklahoma. That would be a 12th stamp on the top. There's 2 other states that have already taken this away and allowed us to start using on the body of the can instead of the lid, because they're recognizing that this is not effective anymore for communicating to the consumer about redeemability. We strongly believe that it's going to be better to put it on the side of the can, especially as there were 6 states that considered adding CRV this past year. There's going to be probably, you know, states that do come forward and add things. The Oklahoma and West Virginia are relatively new, so we're pushed for space on this. So we need that flexibility. The bottom of the can, if you look at it, that indelible ink that's down there is track and trace. This is how bottlers track this can if there's any problems in it. It would be kind of inappropriate to interfere with that track and trace effort by trying to stuff a bunch of just moving from incising the top to on the bottom, and putting the indelible ink on the top, like you had it up there, is going to completely cover up all the other ones that are up there. So you're ruining clarity and of the other marks. So what you're doing in fraud and have done in fraud and tracking bulk containers and shipments of containers coming in from out of state, that's where the focus needs to be on fraud. We strongly support your efforts in that, and we really praise the department for the activities that they've been the last couple of years and making some very significant busts. But worrying about it, whether it's the grandma that came back from Reno with a 6-pack, that's not the type of fraud we're after. this is not, our request to allow it to be just on the body of the can is not going to impact that. So we strongly encourage you to go into a regulatory development process with the allowance of it just being on the body of the can.
Thank you for your comments. We've got one more comment.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sandra Reynolds, and I am with the Office of Public Affairs. And as a lot of you, or some of you may know, I take calls from the public every day, all day, complaints and all. One of the main issues with regard to, and speaking to Mark Murray's point, is the labeling of the aluminum cans. Having the stamp on the lid or on the bottom is appropriate. The reason why is because, as we all know, when folks redeem their bottles and cans at the recycling centers, if the recycling center attendant cannot see the label, the CRV message, they are not required to accept them. So if the message was printed on the side of the beverage container, and as we all know, we typically stomp on the cans, the message is always going to show on the lid or on the bottom. So that's my main concern. Even though we're not talking about plastic bottles, I just want to put it out there because, again, I somewhat have a pulse on Californians' recycling habits. And the label on the plastic bottle, and I know we're not talking about this, but this is my only opportunity to bring it up. When the labels are removed, for whatever reason, especially during the summer months, the labels can fall off the plastic bottles. If manufacturers were required to have the message printed on the plastic material as opposed to on the paper label that comes off, that allows consumers to redeem those bottles and cans with no issues, because I get a lot of complaints, a lot of BMWs, and Mike knows what that means, from the public about not being able to redeem their plastic bottles. And I say all this because I answer these calls, and first and foremost, I'm a strong consumer advocate, so I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Jen Coyle. I'm the owner of the Can Van. We're a canning materials and services provider based here in Sacramento. We're going into our 8th year, so we've been a very small business, but we actually provide a lot of the cans to craft breweries, small wineries, cideries, and startup cocktail companies all around Northern California. So from our perspective, just initially hearing about this proposal is that we've struggled at many points along the way working with the large can manufacturers because we have to buy lids in such large volume, but we actually have customers who have different needs in terms of what their incising is depending on what their product is. So it would greatly simplify things for a small business like ours if we could do away with the lid printing and everyone could just meet their requirements by putting it on the side of the can. And to that end, I also agree with the Can Manufacturers Institute that the bottom real estate is pretty full up at this point in time. Something that we've been doing a lot more of recently is wine in cans, which is kind of the way of the future and has always been creating a lot of confusion because wine, even in a can size, such as a 6-ounce, 8-ounce, or 375 milliliter, which is like a 12-ounce, is still not subject to a CRV. So to that point, I would also just recommend bringing the wine in to the CRV program in order to reduce some of the confusion in that area. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Again, Mark Murray with Californians Against Waste. I mean, frankly, all of these single-use containers for beverages should be included in the beverage container recycling program. I will say that one of the unintended benefits of requiring having the CRV on the top of the can is that some of your customers who are selling non-CRV beverages are paying the CRV because they're purchasing lids, because the only lids that are available have CRV on it, and we are getting some recycling benefit from that because distilled spirit cocktails and wine that have this on it, because they don't feel like having a special lid made for them, are in fact paying the CRV, which I don't have any problem with that. They're paying the CRV for an aluminum can that's then getting recycled, and the fund is getting a payment. But again, it points to the fact that we have non-CRV beverage containers that have CRV on the top of their can. We have CRV containers that haven't paid a CRV, that are sold all over the country, that if someone was clever enough could bring all those containers. And again, I'm really hard pressed to find. I look, and I'm hard pressed to find aluminum cans outside of California that don't have CRV, that don't have California CRV written on them. So I think that the idea of focusing enforcement on the CRV label may be, in this age, misfocused. And as Greg was saying, I think you guys have done a fabulous job on enforcement of the mega bales and truckloads of material that have been coming from out of state. I think we've got a corrected recycling rate in the state, and I don't think we should be holding consumers that have a water bottle or a plastic bottle or my glass beer bottle that I inadvertently rub the CRV off the side of the container. I mean, my recycler's continuing to redeem that. I'd hate to see that recycler get busted because they've redeemed a container where the label of an obvious CRV container has torn off, washed off. So anyway, I like the expansion of this to, as proposed by the can manufacturers, to allow it on the side of the container without it being also on the top or bottom.
Thank you. With no additional questions coming in from our online folks, unless there are any additional questions, I'd like to go ahead and close out the workshop. Okay, perfect. We do encourage submission of comments from all interested parties. You can just go ahead and submit those to dorworkshops@calrecycle.ca.gov, and we will be taking those until October 18th. I'd like to thank everyone who attended the workshop and everyone who attended online as well. Thank you all so much.